The veterinarian comes from the Latin word and was applied in ancient Rome. It is as impossible to say when or where began as it is to claim where or when animal husbandry was established. Most likely some form of medicine followed quickly upon the earliest domestication of animals. However, the rough evolution in ancient civilizations such as China, Mesopotamia, Egypt and India was practiced long before it arrived in Greece and Rome, and later developed throughout Europe. Physicians of Asia practiced veterinary medicine before the written records were created. The Greek and Roman writers associated with the epithet father of veterinary medicine only contributed to what had already been established. As noted, it is impossible to state where veterinary medicine was first practiced definitively, but the earliest documented evidence comes from China. One of the most popular myths of ancient China concerns the god Fuxi and his sister wife Nua, who created humanity and bestowed upon them the gifts of civilization. Fuxi is known as the ox-tamer for his gift of domesticating animals, and clear evidence of domestication was already long established when Banpo village was thriving between 4,500 and 3,750 BCE. According to the myth, Nua created each human being by hand but found the process tiring, as it seemed endless, and so established marriage as a means by which humans could reproduce themselves. After that was taken care of, it became clear that they could not survive as they had no idea how to feed themselves. Fuxi taught people how to fish, hunt, write, plant and harvest crops, foretell the future through divination, and finally domesticate the animals of the wild so they would not have to spend so much time hunting for them. After domesticating animals, Fuxi is said to have taught humans how to care for them. The earliest examples of veterinary medicine in China have to do with the care of cattle and horses. Doctors known as horse priests used acupuncture to successfully treat lame or colic horses 3000 BCE. Veterinary practice developed from that point to include other animals and the use of medicinal herbs, incantations, and various procedures in the treatment of illness and injury. In Mesopotamia, veterinarians were also already established by 3000 BCE, and the practice was also associated with the divine. The goddess of health and healing was Gula, who instituted the art of medicine with her consort Pabalsag, her sons Damu and Ninazu, and her daughter Gunura. Of her children, the most influential was Ninazu, associated with serpents, healing, and the underworld, whose symbol was the staff of intertwining serpents, later associated with Hippocrates and today, the symbol of the medical profession. The two primary types of doctors in Mesopotamia were the Asu, a medical doctor who treated illness or injury based on observation and physical treatment of symptoms, and the Atsipu, what one today would call a faith healer, who relied on magical incantations, prayers, and herbs, and both of these types could be veterinarians. There was no distinction between the two. One was not thought to be any more effective or legitimate than the other, and so both natural and supernatural treatment of illness was practiced together. The first veterinarian known by name is the Sumerian doctor Urlugaladina, who served under the king of Lagash. Urlugaladina's cylinder seal, essentially his identification, shows a pair of tongs along with Ninazu's staff of the intertwined serpents, and he is more closely associated with veterinarian practice than work with humans, though no details as to how his practice developed are available. Whatever these early veterinarians did, they had established their practices well enough to be able to define animal-related disease and treatment by the time the Law Code of Eshnunna was written in 1930 BCE. The Code of Eshnunna identifies rabies and its effects, and sets the fine to be paid by the owner of a rabid dog who bites someone. The Code of Hammurabi recognizes veterinarians as a separate class of medical doctors, and sets the fees they are to be paid, establishing veterinary care as a respectable profession. By the time the Code of Hammurabi was engraved in Babylon, veterinarians in Egypt were already long recognized for their skill and already working on veterinary science, known today as the Kahun Papyri, dated to the period of the Middle Kingdom of Egypt. The Kahun Papyri contains texts on several subjects ranging from festivals to be held to gynecological issues and treatments, to veterinary practice and diagnoses of illness. It should come as no surprise that veterinary science would have developed fully in ancient Egypt as the culture placed a high value on animals of all kinds. Although the culture is most closely associated with the veneration of cats, all life was considered sacred. The Egyptian diet was almost wholly vegetarian, and animals were honored. As an agricultural society, humans and animals in ancient Egypt would have regularly shared the same space, often to the detriment of each other. Some scholars have argued that veterinarian practice in Egypt is among the earliest in the world, dating back at least to the time of the Old Kingdom, 2613 to 2181 BCE, if not earlier. Among these diseases was African trypanosomiasis, and especially Nagana, animal trypanosomiasis, which was spread by the bite of the tsetse fly. Infected flies that bite animals would then spread the disease to humans, causing the sleeping sickness, which, if left untreated, eventually led to death. The Kahun Papyrus specifically deals with Nagana, given as Ushao in the text, prescribes remedies, and specifically mentions the importance of washing one's hands before, during, and after treating an infected animal. The Kahun text deals primarily with the treatment of cattle, but birds, dogs, and fish, all three kept as pets, are also mentioned. Whether Egyptian veterinary science traveled to India or developed there independently is unknown, but by the time of the Vedic period, veterinarians were an established and respected profession in the region. The great physician Sushruta, 7th or 6th century BCE, known as the father of Indian medicine and father of plastic surgery, developed medical techniques which were used for treating humans as well as animals. His work is considered the oldest text on plastic surgery in the world, and the basis for veterinarian practice in India. Shalihotra was a physician who dedicated himself solely to the care of animals. His work, dealing with veterinary science, is based on Sushruta's earlier work on human anatomy, physiology, and surgical techniques. These were adapted for the care of animals. By the time of the great King Ashoka, the first veterinary hospital in the world was established in India, with its underlying vision based on the work of Shalihotra. The Greeks followed the same paradigm as other civilizations in, no doubt, developing some form of veterinary science shortly after the domestication of animals, but one of the most comprehensive treatments of the subject comes from Hippocrates, who emphasized a completely empirical approach to diagnosing and treating both humans and animals. Hippocrates was the first Greek healer to maintain that illness was caused by environmental factors, diet, and lifestyle, and was not a punishment from the gods nor an infliction caused by evil spirits or the restless dead. He was not, however, the first in history to make this claim, as it was suggested much earlier by the Egyptian polymath Imhotep, and later by Sushruta and Shalihotra in India. Hippocrates suggested diet as one of the most important aspects of maintaining health, in humans or animals, as well as regular exercise, sunlight, massage, relaxation, and elevation of one's mood, aromatherapy, and regular baths. Although his work focused on human health, it also extended to the welfare of animals. By 130 BCE, a man named Metrodorus of Lamia, in Thessaly, was famous for his skill in healing animals based on Hippocrates' work. He was especially known for his work with horses, and was well respected as a veterinary surgeon. There is no doubt that Greek medical practices were adopted by the Romans, and most famously, by Galen, who recognized the similarity in human and animal physiology. He was able to treat his patients as well as he did through his knowledge of anatomy derived from his work with animals. He correctly assumed that what was harmful to an animal would be equally so to a human, and conversely, what would encourage health in the one would most likely do so in the other. Even so, Galen's work with animals is usually eclipsed by that of the Roman writer, best known simply as Vegetius, whose guide to veterinary medicine became the standard reference work for those working in the veterinary field. Nothing is known of Vegetius outside of his works which deal with diseases and the treatment of horses and cattle. He had read Hippocrates, as he insisted on the same basic understanding a veterinarian should have, before treating a patient, that disease was naturally occurring and was not caused by divine or supernatural influences. His work has led many through the centuries to consider him, often above other Roman or Greek writers, as the father of veterinary medicine for the scope of his work and its influence on the development of veterinary science. After the fall of the Roman Empire and the rise of Christianity, prior knowledge of veterinary science was lost. The lack of interest in veterinary medicine stemmed from the medieval church's insistence that animals had no immortal soul and were not worthy of medical treatment. If one's pet cat or dog died, according to the view of the church, it was of as little consequence as the death of a fly or flea. It was not until the late 12th and early 13th centuries that Europeans began to pay attention to the health of animals as it affected human well-being. Even so, this interest was primarily focused on the health of horses and cattle, the one used in warfare and transport, and the other for food and agricultural endeavors. The health of an animal for its own sake would not become a focus until much later. It was not until the Age of Enlightenment, 1715, that veterinary medicine would again be regarded with any serious interest. Those who wrote on the subject did not know the contributions of the Chinese, Sumerians, Indians, Egyptians, or others, and believed the works of the Greeks and Romans to be the earliest in the field. It was natural therefore that Hippocrates, Galen and Vegetius should be the ones whose work informed the first veterinary schools in Europe. The first veterinary educational institute in Europe was founded in France in 1762, as a response to the massive deaths of cattle due to the plague. The students made such impressive strides in research, diagnosis and treatment, that the French king Louis XV established a royal school of veterinarian medicine in 1765, and other schools would follow in other European countries. The actual father of veterinary medicine, or mother for that matter, may never be known, but the practice has a much longer and grander history than is generally assumed.